just to make sure that we can video, I think it might be perfect. Hopefully you can still see my screen. Is that perfect? Okay, great, thank you. If my screen looks a bit small to you, something I suggest you can do is go to View Options. It'll be somewhere around the middle top of your screen, and click Zoom Ratio, and then you can change the ratio of the screen to whatever suits your screen best, and you can also move that around. So hopefully you can see my cursor, which is highlighted, but if you need a bigger picture, I recommend you go to View Options and change the zoom ratio. So just so that you're aware, this is the tutorial that I will be following. I will be using free and open source data. So what this means is that you can give this a try yourself at home. So the first step in these instructions is the data download. So what I'm going to quickly show you first is the Copernicus Open Access Hub. So this is where we would normally go to retrieve the data. And the first thing that we would need to do is sign up for an account. So I obviously already have a login, but if I was someone new, such as yourselves possibly, I would click sign up here. I would be directed to this kind of form where I can put in very simple information. And I have checked, and Mauritius is here in the country list. So you should all be able to download data quite easily using the Copernicus Open Access Hub. Yeah, it's right here. Instead, I'm just going to log in so I can just do my demonstration. And if I was interested in downloading a product, say, for example, over Mauritius, what I would do is come over here to where it is. I would choose my area of interest button, and you can see I can drag however large of an area I want. Sometimes if you draw a large area like this, you can expect to receive quite a lot of SAR imagery. So I'm just going to keep it quite simple and small. Say, for example, I'm interested in this particular area. And then we can come over here to find a few parameters. So you can sort by the sensing period, for example. We can say, I'm interested in SAR imagery from the beginning of this month that we're in to today, which is practically at the end. Like I said, we're interested in Sentinel-1 imagery, which is our synthetic aperture radar products. So I'm going to click that. Polarization, you do have options here, but this is normally limited by the acquisition mode that you're interested in. So I'm just going to leave this blank so we don't get any errors there. Product type, we're going to be working with GRD. This stands for ground range detected. So this is the most common and easily accessible product from Sentinel. You can do more analysis with SLC, which is single look complex or raw data. But for today's tutorial, we're keeping it quite simple. And for most people and for most applications, GRD is the most appropriate product type. The sensor mode, as we've briefly discussed just in the last session at the end, we're going to select the IW. So this stands for interferometric wide swath. And then once we've done that, we have all the parameters we need in order to begin a search. This usually can be quite short. You'll see we've got only a few products here as we've selected quite a small area. But if we were instead interested in a much longer period of time, we can go all the way back, approximately 6 months, and search again and find a significantly more products available to us. Something which isn't shown here is that sometimes if we go back quite a long time, say for a couple of years ago, these products will be grayed out, and that means that they're stored on an archive server. And so, for example, in our case, we can download this product straight away. If you are looking at older products, you will need to make a request essentially to the Access Hub, and they will tell you when that product is ready to download. So that's just one thing to bear in mind if you're looking at older products. So the specific product that we are going to be looking at today, I can quickly show you. I just copy the file name here. You can see here, I've already downloaded this product, but if I were to show you what it looks like on the Copernicus Open Access Hub, it would look like this. And we can also view the product details. So this is basically, we're inspecting the product, and you can see here we have a summary of what the file is called and the date. We can confirm that the mode is interferometric wide swath. We can also see the size to ensure that we have enough space on our hard drive. And we can get lots and lots of other kind of metadata in which we might be interested in. For example, if we want multiple subproducts that are in the same orbit, then we would use, say, the orbit number. So this can be important for applications like interferometry, but we're not going to consider that today. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention here is that this question mark in the top right corner is really useful. This is the user guide, and you'll see it opens into an overview of what the Copernicus Open Access Hub offers. So you can see not just Sentinel-1 data, but we have other satellites, different types of sensors, which we will not go into detail here today. But you can see, for example, we are using interferometric wide swath. So I can look at the details of this mode, and I can see here that this is the main mode over land for the Sentinel-1 satellites, and it acquires data with a 250 kilometer swath at a 5 by 20 meter spatial resolution. So about 20 meters spatial resolution. So although this is the main mode over land, this is also a really suitable acquisition mode for ship detection, and that's because of its quite large swath width and coverage area, as well as a good resolution to detect relatively, medium-sized ships. It may struggle on, much smaller ships that are made of maybe different materials like wood, but this will capture the majority of shipping in the sea. Okay. I can see this bar's in my way, but the next thing we're going to do is look at the software. So I've just shown the data, and that's all free to download. And so is the software that we're going to be using to process that data. So the software is called SNAP, which is the Sentinel Application Platform. This is a link or the web page for the download of that. And we can see here it's available in the three main OSs, Windows, Mac, and Linux. Depends which of those you prefer. And we're going to download the Sentinel toolboxes. So I, of course, already have this downloaded, but it is, easy to download. It doesn't take up too much space, hopefully, on your personal computer or your work computer. And in terms of hardware, I think something like a simple quad-core processor, as well as at least 8 gigabytes of RAM is a general rule of thumb. Anything more than that is obviously better. So I'm going to now quickly open the Snap. I can just. So I have this opened already here. I'm using currently version 8.0. There is a newer version, version 9, but they're very much the same, and there isn't actually too much difference between the latest version, which was only just released, just announced. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is open that product, which I briefly showed around Mauritius. So there's two methods I can do this. I can go up to here where it says File. I can go on to the Open Product, and then I can simply browse to the directory, thank you, of where I saved that product. So, for example, I organize my folders generally in this way, and I call the original whatever I've downloaded from the Copernicus Open Access Hub, and then any subsequent processing that I do, I put in a different folder, and I'll show that in a bit more detail in a moment. So this is the product that we've downloaded, and you can see it's in a zip file. I can simply just click on the zip and open that, and it will appear here in the Product Explorer panel. Another way of doing it, just to briefly show you, is that I can also click and drag into the Product Explorer. Both those methods work with this program. If you want to familiarize yourself a bit more with how Snap works, in the tutorial, I do detail a few tools which run through in a bit more detail of how you open products and load them into Snap and those types of things. These resources are all linked in the tutorial, and there's even a video if you prefer that type of thing. Okay, so now that I have the product in Snap, I'm going to double click on the product itself in order to expand and reveal the product tree subfolders. So all of these are the subfolders. We have metadata, vector data, tie point grids, quick looks, and bands. So the one that we're interested in is the bands. And you can see here we have a few different bands. We have amplitude VH and the intensity VH, and amplitude VV, intensity VV. So this is simply, the VH refers to the polarization. So VH refers to transmit in vertical and receive in horizontal. And for VV, as you can imagine, it's vertical transmit, vertical receive. Differences between these two bands is simply that the intensity is the amplitude squared, essentially. And all this does is provides a nicer contrast image. So things which are bright become a little bit brighter, things which are dark are a little bit darker. This is just easier for us to visualize in the program. Okay, so we've opened up the intensity band, the VH1 specifically, and depending on your hardware, it may take a little while for it to load, but shouldn't take too long. And you can see in the bottom left corner we have navigation. So this just provides us with the detail of the image and in context with the full image, so we don't lose where we are, so that we can zoom in on certain areas in the main window. And other things. We have color manipulation. So this is simply a histogram of the pixel values, and we can manipulate this histogram in such a way that we can improve the visualization of the data set. I'm not sure, there we go. You can have a play here and enhance the features of the image, and you can already start to see we're seeing a few bright spots on the sea surface, which is a good sign, meaning we can just by eye see that we have a few ships in this particular image. Okay, and then we also have world view. So this is sometimes helpful just to give more context to your image in terms of where it is on the globe. So we don't lose or forget where we are. Okay, so this is just the bands subfolder. Something else which is often useful to look at is the metadata. So you can see one that's called abstracted metadata, and this is often useful for knowing some of the nitty-gritty details of the image, such as what the near and the far incidence angles are of the image, what the path direction is, if it's ascending or descending, what the pixel spacing is. So for Sentinel-1, this would be 10 meters, and other things like the radar frequency, if that's important for any processing down the line. So you can actually see, if I want to just quickly look, I think this product is, yes, so the pass here is descending. So you can see actually by looking at the image in the main window, it's not in the same orientation as you see here in the world view. So this is just simply because the image is essentially flipped here. And what this means is that in the descending paths, the satellite will be traveling from north to south. And essentially, because the satellite is right looking, this is just a characteristic of the satellite, it will be first acquiring data on this near edge here. So the satellite's moving down and it's starting to acquire data from this side first. So this is why, and the image in the main window is built up from top left down to bottom right. So this is the first line and it will be scanning across the image like this. So you can understand we're going to be retrieving information from this side of the island. And this is what we see here. So this is just a simple reason why the image is flipped and doesn't look how we might expect if we saw this in, say, for example, Google Maps. Okay, so that's the metadata, lots of good information in there. What we're going to do now is create a subset. This is often useful for when we have quite a large area, but we're only interested in a subset of that area. So what we can do, and this is also important to reduce computational time, depending on your hardware, we can go to what's called raster and subset. And what we can simply do here is input where you would like your subset scene to start and end, or instead you can include the latitude and longitude data if you have a predefined area of interest, and that can be simply inserted here. This is a very quick process and keeps all of the original features of the image, but it just means we consider a much smaller image, which is great for processing times. In this example, however, I'm not actually going to take a subset. My computer is relatively fast at processing this image, as I've done this before. But it is a worthwhile step to consider if you are looking at other types of imagery. Another reason why we may not want to take a subset is because the land here of the island is relatively small, and we are only dealing with a lot of ocean, which is what we are interested in. We are interested in detecting ships off the ocean, so we wouldn't necessarily want to subset this image any further. Instead, this land is going to be taken care of by using a landmass, and that's going to be covered in a few steps later on. So we're going to ignore the subset, a very important process to remember for operation. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply an orbit file to this data, because we've just downloaded the data from the Access Hub, but since the image has become available to us, some information has been updated, and that information is the orbit files. So we're going to come over to where it says radar in the tool window at the top, and we're going to simply click at the very top, apply orbit file. So we're going to make sure that the source product is the original image, simply numbered 1. And we can also, just to help us, we can reduce this file name. You'll see that the suffix orb has been added automatically. This will be for most operations which you use in Snap. The suffix will be helpfully added to the end. But what we might want to do is also remove some of this information. So just briefly, the file name is very long, and this is because it does contain a lot of information, such as what the sensor is, the acquisition mode, the product, and the polarization. But what we can do is we can remove one of these date times, essentially. This is what this whole section here is saying. This is the sensing start time, and this here is the sensing end time. And because of those two times being so similar, we can remove that, and we can shorten actually this file name by quite a lot in order to just make the readability a bit better. In terms of processing parameters, we can keep all of this as default. There's nothing here that we need to change, and we rarely ever do. And then we can simply run that, and it will save to our file or wherever you may wish to save that. Just to save time, I'm actually going to instead open the data sets that I've already processed, as you do not want to be just staring at loading bars for these things to be processed. So instead, I'm just going to make my life easier and drag that product into Snap. So that's just another example of once we've saved these data sets after processing, we can open them. It will save it as a DIM file, and it will have accompanied data file. And all we need to do is drag that DIM file into Snap, and it will recognize it, and we can open that just like we did for the first image. And I'll click here the intensity. So we now have an orbit file added to this data, which is great because this is important for subsequent processing, especially if you're doing any kind of geometric correction or calibration. Something also worth pointing out is coming back quickly to the operator. You'll also see a little help bar at the top. So what this does is it just explains a little bit about the operator itself. So if you're interested or you're not quite sure what exactly the operator is doing, you can open the help bar, and there's quite a lot of information, usually as well as references to what the operator does. So as I've said, the orbit file, this operator in particular updates the product's orbit file to more accurate satellite position, as well as velocity information. And this is usually available days to weeks after the product has been generated. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a vector landmask to this product. So a landmask is usually applied to ensure that the ship detection is obviously limited to the sea surface and not over land, which can give rise to false alarms or false detections. So just to clarify, a false alarm is actually anything that is detected, even over the sea, which is not a ship. So these can be coastal rocks or buoys or any other type of object that isn't what we're interested in, which is a ship. In this tutorial, we're going to actually use a shapefile that's been derived from OpenStreetMap, which is a really useful data source. I can quickly bring it up here. OpenStreetMap. This often has really good data sets to use and are available for free, and it's open. So we're going to use a landmass that's been derived from this data source. And it's also important to note we've actually applied a 250 meter seaward buffer, and this just helps further remove false alarms that surround the coastline. As the landmass won't be perfect, it will just maybe include a pier or some land, and so we want to remove those two, and that's why we also include a buffer to the product. So what we're going to do is select this product. As you can see, it's highlighted. I'm going to make sure that the orb suffix is highlighted, and we're going to come up to where it says vector, import, and I'm going to choose Esri shapefile. Okay, you can see it instantly comes up to what I've used before. This will just simply be saved to where is convenient for you on your own PC. And then I'm going to click open. And you can see it takes just a few seconds to load that. And instantly you can see it's been applied. So that was successfully applied to the product in this bright red vector file. And you can see that anything within this vector mask will not be considered in the ship detection process or operations, sorry. And that's going to be saved in your, coming again to the subtrees folders in your vector data. So you can see he lives there in the vector data folder. Okay, so now we're going to get on to the main operation, in which is called ocean object detection. This is just simply ship detection. And I'm going to go to where it says radar again. I'm going to come down to SAR applications, ocean applications, and finally ocean object detection. And you'll probably instantly see that this process or operation is made up of various sub-operators. So we have the read, so we're going to read our data set that we've applied the orbit file to, as well as the vector mask. We've got land-sea mask, calibration, adaptive thresholding, and object discrimination. And then finally, we will write that somewhere to file. So let's start here at the read tab. This is quite simple. I'm just going to make sure that I have my latest product selected, number 2, which is the orbit file has been applied, excuse me. Then I'm going to come over to land mask, and I can here select all of the bands as we're going to apply them to each of the individual bands that make up the product. I'm going to uncheck where it says use SRTM 3sec. So this is the default landmask in which is used. And this is simply a digital elevation model in which masks out the areas with, it masks out areas that have positive elevation. So anything, you can imagine sea level is 0, and land in which has any height will be automatically removed. This is often very good and appropriate, and I can also, if we have time, show what that looks like. But instead, we're going to use our vector landmask. So instead, what I'm going to do is click here. I'm going to uncheck SRTM, and I'm going to use vector as mask. And you'll see it automatically appears here in this box, which is good for us, as that's all automatic, don't need to select. And we're going to ensure that we invert the vector. So when you see the mask masking out land, we need to invert it to tell the algorithm we are interested in the sea surface. Whereas if the land mask instead it covers the sea, then we do not need to check that. That's just a small point to be aware of. It is possible to extend the shoreline. So in both examples, in both SRTM and in using the vector, we can extend that further just in case it's not quite masking all the land that we want. I'm just going to leave that though. This may require a bit of trial and error depending on which area you're considering. I'm now going to come over to calibration. And again, I want to select both the polarizations, as we would like to calibrate both. Often if you just leave, if you don't need to select these, but if it selects one, then I like to select both just to make sure that it is considering both. But usually it will be blank, and that will do the same thing as selecting them both. Okay, so radiometric calibration. This simply relates the pixel values, the actual digital numbers from the scene, to radar backscatter values, which we heard a little bit about in the first session. And this is really important, and it's really necessary for any quantitative analysis that we would like to do with SAR imagery. Any analysis in which compares different SAR sensors or compares data over a certain time period ideally needs to be calibrated. If we do not calibrate, we can only then qualitatively assess the image. We can still see ships and where they're bright, and we can still detect them, but it's normally ideal to calibrate. This is true for many different applications of SAR data. So I'm going to keep things here default. I'm going to keep it as sigma naught. This is the most common output for calibration. So nothing really that needs to be done here. For the next step, we have the adaptive thresholding tab. This is a very common method used for ship detection and relatively simple for SAR imagery. So as we've heard, in satellite SAR imagery, essentially objects on the sea surface, such as ships, are identified as this collection of bright pixels, while flat, smooth surfaces, such as the ocean, are identified as dark areas. And this is due to how those two things scatter the incoming electromagnetic radiation. For example, ships return a much higher or much greater backscattered response or signal compared to that of the ocean. And as we've also heard, the backscattering mechanisms are different for each of for ships and the sea surface. Ships exhibit quite a few different scattering mechanisms, such as single bounce and double bounce, even volume scattering, depending on the infrastructure or the different things on board the ship. Whereas the sea surface is mainly composed of surface scattering. So coming back to the adaptive thresholding algorithm, this is applied using a window. And I think the best way to see this is if I can zoom in here. Just minimize that a bit. So these parameters essentially correspond to this image here, these boxes. Okay, so the adaptive thresholding algorithm is applied using a sliding window. So this box will slide across the image and make a test on each of the cells that are within that box. And for each pixel under test, which is known as the target box, a new threshold threshold value is calculated based on the statistics of the background of that box. And simply, if the pixel value is above this threshold, then the pixel is classified as a pixel belonging to an object. And we're now going to specify the following parameters. So for the target window, so for this, sometimes called the cell under test or the target box, we're going to specify 30 meters. Okay. And then for the guard, this is essentially the length of the smallest object to detect. Okay. And for the size of the largest object to detect, the guard window, we're going to leave as 500 meters. Generally speaking, ships do not get much larger than 500, but we could specify, 600, 500 meters, a sensible number there. And then for the background window size, we're going to specify as 800 meters. So this is usually, as you can see, larger than the guard area. And this just ensures we gather accurate statistics of the local background. So this is all fine to leave as 800. And then the PFA, this stands for the probability of false alarm. And the higher this number, the fewer false alarms, I should say, and the more detections, real detections that we specify. So you can see these parameters we can easily play with to get the best possible results. But these are the parameters we're going to set for this particular example. Okay, and the final step here is object discrimination. So this attempts to filter out false alarms based on a minimum and a maximum size. So our minimum is going to be 30 meters, which we can leave, and our maximum size is 600 meters. So an object with a dimension smaller than 30 or a dimension larger than 600 will be excluded from this process. And then finally, we're going to write this product to our computer and to a suitable directory. So for example, I call any processing that I do, as I said, processing, and I'm going to save it to this directory, which I already have done. Okay. This takes, this can take a few minutes depending on your hardware, and to avoid watching, as I said, the loading bar, I'm just going to instead drag and drop what that looks like into Snap. So I'm going to go into bands, and I'm going to look at the sigma 0VH band. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just bring Yeah, it's a bit bright, but what we can do is look at the bit mask. So essentially what this does is it will return all of the objects that were deemed to be a ship, and you know, the bit mask essentially returns a 0 or 1. So this is easy for us to kind of look at and also transfer to other programs if we wish to. I'm just going to quickly see if the mask is any better. See the differences between the two polarizations, in fact, and in general, VH tends to be better for ship detection, just as a side note, and VV much better for oil spill detection, things like that. But with this bit mask and with the ship detections, we can also see the, where would it be? Should be able to see the table. All the blank. Where is that gone? Often we will be able to see a table. So these detections, as you can see, might be a little bit hard to see, but we do also receive a table format of those that usually is in the form of a CSV file, which I'll just quickly show you. And this is the kind of table data that we get that Snap outputs for you. You can see in this particular example, we had around over 50 ships in this particular scene. And it gives details of where the pixels were in which they were detected, as well as an estimate of their width, and should be their length as well, somewhere. Yes, length and width, which is quite easy and useful for classification reasons. Just going to quickly look again. Often we can apply a log scale in order to improve the visibility of the image, and you can often see ships within the scene by eye, and you'll see again this this phenomenon where the ship is displaced from its wake almost, and this is due to the Doppler shift. And this is analogous to, say, for sound. You know, if a siren was approaching you, then the sound waves are compressed and you hear a higher pitch, and then as the, say, ambulance drives away, we get lower pitch sound, and that's kind of what's going on here. Doppler, that's Doppler applied to sound, but Doppler being applied to synthetic aperture radar often results in this displacement from the ship in its wake. So you can actually see that quite easily in the SAR itself. Some other suggested steps. So that's pretty much ship detection in a nutshell. Just simply using that ocean object detection operator. What we can do, however, is we can go back and we can change some of these parameters in order to detect smaller sized vessels, or if we are detecting large vessels, if these parameters are set quite small, you might find that they detect the same vessel twice. So it's important that we go back and we optimize essentially these parameters in order to get the maximum number of real detections and to minimize those false alarms that we mentioned. So in the tutorial, I have a table in which suggests a few different parameters that you can try. I do recommend giving that a go, as you will see a difference between the results. I also recommend trying to run the ocean object detection operator using the SRTM 3 seconds landmask, as this will be an interesting comparison to make with the vector data. You can see which one actually masks out land better. And then the final thing I wanted to mention, or two final things, is what we can do to this image is we can actually auto-rectify the image. So essentially we can unflip it essentially and make it look how we might expect in Google Earth. And in order to do that, we would go to radar, and then we would go to geometric and ellipsoid correction, and we would use the average height range Doppler. Again, we would keep most of these parameters as default, nothing to change here. You can see EC has been added as a suffix to mean ellipsoid correction, and all this can be remained the same, and we can click run. And if I can quickly show you what that also looks like, you'll be able to see that it looks a bit more how we might expect. You can see it's been unflipped, and this is how we might see the island on Google Earth Pro. And you'll also see these red dots, which weren't shown before, not entirely sure why, but these are showing where those ships have been detected in the scene, okay? And then the very last thing I wanted to mention was the fact that you can use Google Earth in order to import that CSV data. So I can very quickly show you here what that looks like. This is going to be latitude, and we're going to make sure this is longitude, make sure they correspond, and we're going to finish there. And then you can also view this data in any other program in which you're more familiar with. Okay, so that's pretty much ship detection in a nutshell. Thank you for your time, and I hope you found that useful.